My name is Charlese Antoinette Jones, and I am a costume designer. I grew up in suburban Maryland outside of Washington, D.C. During the Chocolate City era of D.C., which was amazing. And when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a lawyer or a journalist, actually. That's what I wanted to be. But I also really loved drawing outfits for my Barbie dolls, and I would spend like hours at like a desk drawing all these fun outfits. So yeah, it's interesting that that wasn't like my, and I think because I wasn't exposed to like creative career fields, I didn't understand that like me drawing those Barbie doll outfits was something to be taken seriously. I think in school you talk about being a lawyer or a doctor, or, and I did like writing as well, so that's where the journalism came in. But yeah, I didn't know about having a career in the arts at all. So because I grew up religious, I grew up going to the black church. And when you go to a black church and you see how people show up, for service, they're dressed, dressed to the nines. And a lot of the people, that's their opportunity to like express themselves, because they may work a service job during the week where they wear a uniform, or they may work a corporate job where they have to be like a lot more subdued. So the black church is very lively. In the black community, respectability politics is big, and how you show up and present yourself through clothing is important, because a lot of times you're being judged just because of who you are. So we are always taught to come and present and look nice, every day, and put your best foot forward, and that's through your dress. And then also when I was in high school, me and my friends were, I grew up in mall culture, being in suburban Maryland, and like when you go to a mall, it's like the same thing, you know what I mean? Everyone's buying the same stuff. I remember being in high school and me and my friends started to experiment with like deconstructing clothing, so like ripping up jeans, bleaching them, like putting things back together with safety pins before we knew how to sew, painting things, drawing on things. And so that was like my first foray into design, was like doing all this deconstruction and like making outfits to go to parties, with my friends, which was a lot of fun. And we even said we were gonna have a clothing business together, and we had our business cards, and like we went to New York for inspiration, like we were really gonna do it. I always loved watching films. One of my favorite films is actually Charles Heston's Ben-Hur. I know it's weird. Every time I say that, people are like, what? So I grew up in a very religious family, and most of the movies that I was exposed to had religious themes. And Ben-Hur always stood out to me because it was this epic tale of this person and all the changes he goes through in his life. And you can track the changes in how he's like a wealthy man in the beginning. He's wearing all these beautiful like Jewish robes and things. And then he becomes a slave, and then he's like really like tattered and torn. And then he gets adopted by someone who's like high up in the Roman Empire. And then he's like donning Roman robes. And then he races horses. So he has like this sick chariot outfit on. As a kid, I just remember the story and how it was told through the clothing really striking me. Another movie that was really big for me was Malcolm X. And Ruth Carter's work, and discovering that she was a young black woman was really cool. I didn't know that like costume design was an attainable career until I learned about her. I think it started in college. So college exposed me to different career fields in fashion. And being in New York exposed me to how attract to becoming a costume designer through the fact that there were things shooting there. So in college and fashion school, I was going to school during the day, but I tell people like my other education was at night because of fashion television, because of the Style Network. So at the time, they would interview stylists, and that's how I learned what a stylist was and who and what they did. So they would interview Robert Verdi, who at the time was one of the biggest stylists, and they would show runway shows like all night long. The Paris collections, the London collections, couture shows like all night long. So that was like my other education, which was really dope. When I got to New York, I started seeing things being filmed all over the city, and it clicked one day. I'm literally walking down the street, and there's like a truck that says wardrobe on it. And I was like, well, how do I get on that truck? New York Fashion Week. I used to work backstage. I used to dress models for like big shows. And I would just talk to anybody who wanted to talk to me, and they would ask me like, oh, what are you doing, or what do you want to do? Just casually in conversation. And I was like, what I really want to do? I really want to do costume design. And I would just like tell every single person I met that, until one day someone was like, oh, actually, I'm starting a movie. Do you want an internship? It was an independent film called Solitary Man, starring Michael Douglas, Danny DeVito, and Susan Sarandon. That was the first film I did. and Ella Mirajnik was one of the costume designers, as well as Jenny Gehring. So that was my first experience working in a costume department, and I did that for like 2 weeks, and then I started PAing. It's designing characters through clothing, but it's also so much more than that, because a lot of what we do as a costume designer is pick up what is going on in the environment around the person and translate that into the correct color for that environment. Like this correct texture in this environment, the right silhouette for the period. It's really, really complex, and it's awesome. I love it because it allows me to be like a nerd and be celebrated for it. My approach is like anti-costumey in a way, because like, I'm a lover of films, and I love when I can get like immersed in the story and it feel like the clothing is real, and it feel like the characters are real and the people are real, and not that it's like a show that's being put on. So I think what I bring to costume design is like that really grounded sensibility, and also my take on color. I think is interesting to people, and my use of color, and the way I constrict my color palettes and form my color palettes, and how they interact with the environments that they're in. I actually love designing both the principals and the background. I treat them with equal care because I know how much the background can like inform everyone who's watching the picture very fast where we are. And I think that it's so important that we take the time and care as costume designers into our background as well as our principals. So what I do with principals is, I do a lot more like hands-on, one-on-one work with the actors to develop their characters with them, with the director, showrunner, writer, whoever is like really hands-on involved in that process. It's a collaboration between all of us. I come and I present my ideas, but ultimately it's a collaboration. With the background, it's about really designing out the world and making sure my team understands exactly what I'm expecting to see in each scene. In terms when we're talking about, okay, it's a party scene. All right, I want this type of person and this type of look. I want this type of person and this type of look. I want, these kind of variations of color, spattered throughout. Like, it's very, very specific. So I may not always get to touch every single person, but my mark is on every single character, whether they're principal or background. I think some of the best experiences I've had are with writer-directors, because I think they have such a close relationship with story and a deeper understanding of the characters. And it's really nice to be able to go to a director who also wrote the film and be like, hey, I need some more insight on this character. Movies that I had that experience on: Newlyweds with Shaka King, See You Yesterday with Stefan Bristol, Air with Ben. Also, my second movie I did with Shaka, which is Judas and the Black Messiah. I think one of the biggest moments for me of my career, and as a costume designer, that felt like the most rewarding, and I was like super duper proud of myself and also the team of people that I was working with, was the People's Church scene in Judas and the Black Messiah. It's a huge scene, it's a huge crowd, and I'm getting chills thinking about it. And when you look out into the crowd, you feel like you're in 1969. And I was like, we pulled it off. And it was a labor of love, and it just felt so real. The characters, from principals to background, had so much texture. And, from like the berets they're wearing, to women in these sweater vests with their turtlenecks on, just like a lot of texture, and it just felt very, very real, and I was just super proud of that. Time. Never having enough time. Even sometimes when you have like what you think is a lot of prep time, you're still like up against the clock, because there's so many other factors that affect my job that I have like no control over. Schedule changes, casting being late, someone getting COVID and then recasting someone over a weekend, like, you know, like all these things that are just outside of my control. I mean, there's just so many examples of things like that, but it always comes down to time. Ultimately, that's just what it is. Working with other artists for sure. Yeah, like working with other amazing artists is like the best part of my job, and it really feeds me and inspires me, and just like in this weird way reaffirms me like, oh, you're an artist, you know, because like when I start getting into it with, you know, even people like Ben, and I'm just like, oh yeah, like we're artists, like we're doing this, and I think because I just didn't, like, again, I had no concept of this. Like, there's no one in my family doing a career in the arts, you know, like I am. So I'm always surprised, you know, that I'm working with people and it's like we have our own language as artists, and not that many people can relate to us in these ways. So when we find each other, when we're working with each other, it's like such a gift, you know, for me. I mean, the only person that mattered, you know, whether it was support or pushback, was my mother, because she was my primary caretaker, and she was very supportive. I mean, she was so supportive to the point where I just spoke at a high school, and I told a story about how, you know, when I was my sophomore year of college, we didn't have any money to like put me back in school, but my grades were so good. My mom was like, this would be just like such a waste for you to not go back to school. So we literally like packed my mom's car to the brim and drove me back to college and like basically begged for me to get back in school. You know, like other people's parents might have been like, oh, you just need to go to community college or whatever. And my mom was like, you know, you believed in yourself so much. Like, how could I not believe in you? Yeah, I'm really lucky. Like, we didn't have a lot, but my mom was just like down for the ride. And that's all you need is someone to be your roll dog, you know? I'm doing my first opera. I'm kind of doing the career backwards because most of the time people like start in theater and opera and then they transition to TV and film. I started in fashion, transitioned to TV and film, and now I'm doing theater. I would say work with your friends and create your own work, number one, and keep doing it. You know, just find a group of people, maybe a couple groups of people that you enjoy creating with, and just create, you know, create for the sake of creating. Don't worry about like anything else besides like, am I having a good time? Am I enjoying this? Am I doing this with people I love to collaborate with? And am I proud of the work that I'm doing? And yeah, and just keep pushing forward like that. And also, you know, if you align yourself with people who are in like really awesome programs at various universities like USC or NYU, like, you know, because a lot of the opportunities that I got came from, you know, people who came out of those programs or were doing thesis films and things like that. That's how I was able to build my career. So that's also like a really good strategy, is to get locked into those networks. It was cool because Ben trusted me. So when your actor and director trusts you, the job's easy. So and he wanted to like shoot all his stuff up front. So that got a little crazy because of time, right? Because we like all his suits were custom built to fit him. Pretty much everything he wore was custom made, except for the tracksuit he wears at the end for the outro or the end credits. Getting a full suit made for a 6 foot something man takes time. But you know, it was worth it because they fit him perfectly. He looks great. All his shirts were made. You know, so he was actually like pretty easy because his costumes, you know, that's a lie. So it wasn't him. It was the running look that everyone loves. That one drove us a little crazy because like it was athletic, you know, fabrics that are hard to find in the U.S. You know, and it took a lot of sourcing and a lot of work. And one of my shoppers had to drive like 2 hours outside of LA to get the white fabric for his jacket because I wanted a flat, non-shiny nylon that's like waterproof. And everything that we could find in LA was like shiny and crinkly, and I was like, no, it has to be flat, matte white. And so God bless her, she drove like 2 hours to get that fabric in traffic. It feels weird because it's like I've never, not never, it's a lie. I haven't like had an office job since 2006. So it's like my first time like coming into an office every day and being around like the same people every day. Like I'm used to working on sets where it's like, okay, so I'm on a set for like X amount of months and then I'm on a new set with new people and a new office, like moving my office over and over. But it's kind of cool. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but I'm kind of liking this, like going to the same place every day. When I was younger, I would have been like, absolutely not. I don't want to be in a box. That's why I'm here. You know, I've been developing and coming up with like my own ideas for years, and so when the opportunity to do this came up, at first I was like, what? This is crazy. But then the more I sat and thought about it, I was like, no, this is actually what you do. It's cool to be in an environment where that's happening like all the time, every day, and I'm around other like nerds and film nerds, and we're just like, this would be cool. What about this? You know, just like having these like cool creative conversations every day is really, really nice. You know, I love telling stories, and like I think there's so many stories about various cultures, especially when it comes to clothing, that could be preserved. And explored and even exposed to people that don't know about them. I think it's like a twofold thing. It's like, you know, I feel valued as an artist and heard and seen as an artist. And I think it's helpful when like the people up top are artists and they understand like what you as an artist needs or go through. I don't think I've ever been in an environment like that where I felt like I could talk to, you know, the number one openly and freely, or, you know, the producer openly and freely. Well, I've been able to live better, honestly, you know, like live a little bit, like breathe, like be like, okay. And when you can breathe, you can be creative.